All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our third YouTube Live Q&A. I'm joined here by our New York experts, NYGNB President Joshua Taylor, and our Director of Education and Programming, Susan Miller. To those of us who have watched previous broadcasts, thanks for joining us once again. And to those who are here for the first time, welcome. We think everybody's gonna walk away from this with some great genealogy knowledge and tips. Before we get started, I just wanna say hi to a special group of viewers. We have a group from the American Museum of Natural History's Middle School Institute joining us today. Josh and Sue spent some time with them this past Monday, which we'll tell you more about in a little while. They contributed some fantastic questions as well. So we have a lot today, so let's jump right into it. Thanks, Josh and Sue, for joining us, as always. So right off the bat, we received a number of questions about the New York State death record index, which we had some major news about earlier this summer. We had many people asking about death records and death indexes. So Josh and Sue, do you want to fill us in on the updates with that?
Sue, I'm going to let you answer, because I mean, you have been at the forefront of the news on this.
So the records the indexes that were recently released are for New York State death indexes. New York State and New York City have separate vital record systems. So these indexes were previously only published on microfiche in 11 places in New York State. So people had to go to the 11 repositories. And the folks that Reclaim the Records, like you, Brooke, was able to do a Freedom of Information request and obtained copies of the microfiche. She was able to get them digitized, and they're posted on Internet Archive. And we did a nice blog post, Fred, that was June 6th, I believe. So people can read about it and find the links for that in our June 6th blog post. So instead of having to go to those 11 repositories and look at just the microfiche, you can now view the images of the index online. So you still have to go page by page and look alphabetically for people. Some of the images are a little bit light, so you may find that you do still need to go to one of those repositories for certain years or ones that are not quite as readable. So, but hopefully that's a big step forward for access for indexes for New York vital records.
And when folks want a copy of something they find in the index, Sue.
Yes, we do have a records retrieval service for NYGNB members. So if you found something in the index and wish to request the original record, you can file that request through our records retrieval service. So,
and just a reminder, I mean, it never gets old sort of saying you should always make sure you request those original records.
Absolutely.
You never know what information is there that you're not going to just see on an index.
Right. And this index literally is names and certificate numbers. Simple. And I think maybe the town, but that's about it. You're not going to have a lot of information on the index.
Yep.
So.
Yep. So you want to get those original records.
Right.
Nice. And we will actually soon have those images available in our e-library by the end of September, most likely. It's an enormous amount of images, so it's a lot to handle, but we're going to get it up there very shortly.
Excellent. Great. And we'll let everybody know in our e-news?
yes, definitely. E-news, Facebook, we'll let everybody know for sure.
Okay.
Great. So our next question comes from Gwen, and she would like to know which colleges or universities in New York are repositories for historical material?
Boy, lots. Actually, you shouldn't say all, but many colleges and universities in New York have great material. I've researched at Cornell University before for families up in that area. I know SUNY has other collections, and there's a lot of local, regional sort of universities will have collections for their local area.
Absolutely. You mentioned SUNY. SUNY Fredonia, for instance, has a large collection of Holland Land Company records. Columbia University has specific store ledgers that have to do with Hudson Valley tenant farmers. Jane Wilcox wrote an article about that, and so a lot of universities. SUNY Stony Brook and Hofstra have huge Long Island collections. Many universities, Vassar has some wonderful collections. So, and access to find those, archivegrid.org is probably one of the best entry points, right, Josh?
Yeah, I mean that, and the the New York GNB's guide to research in
yeah.
New York has listings there. And also, if you know of collections at a New York university, let us know, email us, and we'd love to spotlight it in the e-news or the research or on the blog. It takes a village looking to find all of these amazing collections.
And what you were talking about was our big New York Family History Research Guide and Gazetteer.
Yes, the big book.
The big book, as we call it.
Big book.
And those are also, those county guides are available separately as an individual county guide. So, and if you find great collections, let us know so we can update the county guides.
Yep.
Okay, so our next question, we actually have two questions that are very related to each other. So the first one comes from Kate. How do you get the local Catholic churches to share their records? And then sort of on top of that, Barbara also wanted to know if we have any additional information to share about Find My Past Catholic Heritage Archive, and particularly their records related to the New York City Catholic parish records.
Well, local parish records are still under the purview of the local parish priest. So generally you do need to go to that parish. It helps if someone is still, one of your family members might still be a member of the parish, or if you have a local connection, but they are the ones to go to and may have their own particular rules. Some are very cooperative. One of our little tips is print out the press release from Find My Past about the Catholic Heritage Archive, so that they know that there's a company actually working to publish records. So
yeah, well, and I will say, I mean, I know, before I lived in New York, I would write letters, and sometimes it's all you can do to contact some of these these priests and try and get the records. And letters sometimes were not returned. Sometimes I got a flat out no, or just no response at all. And it really does help to go in person or actually hire someone to go to the door and ask. I mean, that doesn't guarantee success by any means, but sometimes that personal interaction, if it's a local parish member or a genealogist even that knows the priest or has researched there before, they might have easier access into those records.
And donations are always appreciated.
Yes, yep.
And we know, this is true of most archives and other places, the people who are working in those offices, their main job is to work with the current parishioners, or if it's a county clerk or a village clerk, the local residents. So genealogists aren't always at the top of their pile. But we do need to be nice to them, so they will be good to other genealogists too.
Yeah, and as far as I know, that the Find My Past question that came up with their Catholic Heritage Archive, I know that it's still a work in progress, and they're still working to digitize and then index those records.
Right, and they've released images for Philadelphia so far, and are working on digitization as they go through. But it's a huge archive.
Yeah, it's a huge project.
And it's those records that are held by the diocese, correct? Not every parish within the Catholic Church.
Yes, and then as soon as those are released, we will certainly let everybody know about it, including if possible, the specific parishes included, and as much information as you need to get right into those as soon as they're out. So, great. So we would like to take a minute to tell you about our own Solar Eclipse Monday, and I don't mean our trip down to Bryant Park to watch the event. We all wore glasses, by the way. But so that morning, Josh and Sue were invited as guest speakers to the American Museum of Natural History, and they spoke with a summer camp there. And we have some questions which we'll begin to answer in a second. But Josh and Sue, do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience down there?
Well, I mean, it's always great to talk to young people involved in family history. It was a very, very very interesting group of middle schoolers that had family from all over the world. Really, who took detailed notes and learned about how to start researching their family history. Right.
They had prepped for this summer camp by doing DNA testing. So they were learning some genetics first and looking at the general results of their DNA tests, and then taking the step of working on their family tree so that they could get into the specifics of their particular genetic genealogy and genealogy. So
great. So and we received a bunch of questions from them, and we'll answer a couple of those right now. So our first one is from camper number 1. if my only deceased grandparent was born after 1940, what can I do to gain more information about them?
Yeah, part of the day I did show them the 1940 census, which is the most recently publicly available census in the US, which were kept closed for 72 years. And we did find one of the campers' great-grandparents on the census. So censuses are not available early, more recent than 1940, so you have to go to other records. And we didn't spend a lot of time on that. So Josh, would you like to tell about some other records?
Well, I mean, some things you can use are city directories or telephone directories that are available even up to the present day, and sites like Ancestry and MyHeritage and Find My Past have access to city directories. In New York, there's a slew of directories online, New York Public Library's website, so you can actually track a family through sort of address by address, year by year. There are all sorts of records. If you have an ancestor that was an immigrant, you can request an A file and get details about their arrival into the United States, request toward citizenship.
The U.S. Customs.
The U.S. Customs, yep.
And Immigration Service, right?
Yep. And there's other things. You can also interview your family members. Now that's something that you spend a lot of time focusing on.
Right, asking your family, and I know that the camp class did do family interviews, which is a great place to start, and picking up any little clue you can from someone. And sometimes you have to ask the questions more than once. People don't always remember the first time, but it may kind of percolate in their brain a little bit, and something may come up, or sharing a family meal and asking about a family recipe might bring something to the fore that they might not have thought of otherwise. People often know more than they think they know about their family.
Yeah, and sometimes the direct question doesn't get you the best answer. So rather than saying, where did you go to school? Ask about what was your day at school like? And you might learn about the name of the school in that process, but when sort of confronted with the direct question, sometimes it's hard to answer with that. So ask around the question.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Great tips, thanks. So camper number 6 asks, are there any other ways to find out ancestors who were 3 to 5 generations ago, given the limited resources? If you only have something like a name and a birthday and a residency, how would you go about finding out more? And then a secondary question, I think many of us wonder this ourselves, why are dates for birthdays sometimes off in various records?
Well, because people didn't know when they were born. I mean, a record is only as good as the informant, and it's very possible that someone just heard January 21st or just heard February 3rd, and that's the date that they put. But you'll find dates off all the time, because we will estimate ages and all sorts of reasons.
Yeah. And we discussed in the class your tip about when somebody answers a question on census, if someone doesn't know, well, are they about 25 years old? And then 25 gets written down even if they're 28 or 22 or something like that. So it's where does the information come from, the informant on information. So birthdays can vary. And there were times when people had incentive for a social reason to fudge the birthday.
To be younger or older,
right?
Depending upon the occasion.
Yes. So there is certainly that. Trying to go from generation to generation. Josh, you made a point about known to unknown.
Yeah, when you're trying to work 3 to 5 generations back and you sort of run short of records that you're used to in more immediate generations, it is about working from that known to the unknown. So take the most recent generation that you know about and gather any of the birth records and census records, and then start working back, and you can also begin to explore the place where the family is from. So generation by generation, to see what other records might be created. So there might be a history written of a town or a county that has details of a 3rd great grandparent somewhere. Those are all things that you can do and that you can look at, but it is important to take that step by step and look at available records for that particular place.
Right, so that becomes part of your research plan, is learning about the place where someone may have come from, so that you can see what record sets were created for that area, that time, that place. So there's a little bit of research that may need to be done before your name research gets done. Is that sum it up pretty well?
Great, thanks. Actually, speaking of DNA, as that was a discussion with the campers on Monday. Josh or Sue, would you like to tell us more? We have a DNA seminar coming up in October with experts Blaine T. Bettinger and Angie Bush. And it's very exciting. I think there are a few more spots left. So would you like to tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, Sue, it's your show, so I'll let you, I'm just excited to go.
We're both excited to go for this weekend. We have a 2-day seminar. Blaine Bettinger runs a blog called The Genetic Genealogist, and he is an expert in the field of genetic genealogy and a trustee for the New York GNB. Angie Bush, that's her degree, is in genetics. And she is a genealogist as well. And the two of them are coming to do a 2-day seminar. So there'll be a series of lectures. They'll also be able to do some personal consultations. So someone like me who has very specific questions about my DNA test and where I need to go to learn more and explore the information that I have, I'll be able to do a consultation with them on my specifics, not the general class knowledge. And so this is a 2-day program, and we are really thrilled to have these two wonderful experts.
Yes, these are two of the best in the world of genetic genealogy, so we're happy to have them.
And Angie lectures and runs seminars and workshops as well. They both do. So.
All right, great. So back to our questions now. We have one from Denise. And my family moved from New York to San Francisco in about 1855. How might they have traveled? Because she's, heard the wagon journey was very long and arduous, and they had 2 very young children with them. So, would it have been by wagon, by ship? How might we find that out?
I mean, the route's going to vary, but they probably went by wagon. I mean, that would be the most logical way that you transfer. Because remember, this is just after the big gold rush started. And so the routes are established. It's a long journey, but you do have established routes. You might have stopped somewhere like Salt Lake City or somewhere on the route to gather supplies. But I'd head more towards the wagon trains and diaries of those in the wagon trains to see if you can verify that.
That's a very good point, Josh. Looking at people's diaries, and it may not be your ancestors' diaries, but if you can find a diary or a journal for someone who lived in San Francisco about that time period, who may have written about their journey there. And yes, could have been by wagon, could have been by ship, because there were ships that would go around Cape Horn, which was another arduous journey. Neither way was easy.
I mean, the stagecoach and wagon was probably less expensive, though I have to look and see exactly year by year on how much the trip was. But not necessarily, both of them could be disastrous journeys.
Right. So.
Great, thanks. So our next question comes from Barbara. So I have family members who settled in Broome County, New York, from Scranton, Pennsylvania, in search of employment. Do you have any tips for finding online records, or would I have to conduct my research on site, and if so, possibly where?
Yeah, that's a little bit difficult question because the question doesn't contain a time period. So it's helpful when you ask a research question, one tip, try and include time period and as specific a place as possible. Broome County, though, does have a fabulous local history and genealogy center located at the Broome County Public Library. It's one of those 11 repositories that has those microfiche indexes, by the way. They also have a they've had really good county and local historians in that county. New York State, by the way, is the one state I know of that has municipal historians. So those historians are appointed for their locality. And there was a former Broome County historian who she would travel around the county with index cards and would write index cards up. So I'm digressing a little bit here, but Broome County has this huge collection of these index cards that she wrote down information about people. Those are not digitized. So in particular for Broome County, you might want to go on site. I did check with the local historian because this question had come in a day or so ago, and they do have city directories, and they have the full run from, I have it here, 1856 to 1981. So the 1856 would be city directories. Those could have the occupations of your folks, if they were there at that time period. You could look at the advertisements to see who was advertising for work. Later directories would be telephone directories. So those would not necessarily have occupations, which is why you believe they moved from Scranton over to Broome County. So, but that's a great resource, and check with those local historians too.
Yeah.
It's always a good idea.
Yeah, so it sounds like heading on site is going to be the best avenue for that research.
Right, for that particular one.
Okay, great, thanks. So now back to a couple more camper questions. We have two from camper number 7. So where could you find information about family members outside of the United States?
Depends on where outside of the United States. If it's a country in Europe, you can look at a site like MyHeritage and find my past. And of course, Ancestry has resources. One tool that we use quite often is FamilySearch.org, which is a free website. But FamilySearch has an online wiki that has pages for every country. And so it will at least begin to direct you to tools that you can use for that specific country. So go to FamilySearch.org and the wiki, go to the specific country and start to dive into those tools.
Right. Right, and that's something that if people have a user account, they can contribute to the wiki too.
Yep.
So if you find a good source in a particular country, you could contribute to the genealogy community by adding your knowledge to it.
Yeah, and another actually good free website to use is called cindyslist.com. Cindy's List is a compiled list of sort of links from all over the internet, but it can be broken up by country. So you could go into a specific country you're researching in and click on a resource there. So both of those should be able to get you started.
Right. And so using those tools, then you can start to formulate a research plan.
Yep. Yep. And countries keep their records differently. Some countries have very detailed vital records. Like Australia has these incredible vital records, and other countries don't have their records kept that way. It's just the nature of how a country decides to keep its records throughout its history.
Right. And if you're finding a lack of records, the DNA step, which the campers have done, is a really good thing, because then you can start looking at cousin matches and things like that to hopefully fill in a little bit.
Yep.
And one thing we do have to remember as genealogists is most of those records were not written so we as genealogists could find them 10, 100, 200 years later. They were written for an entirely different purpose.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, you may not find a written record that will directly answer one of your questions. So
great, thanks. And then the second question, also from camper number 7, how do we, those of us who are here today, begin to preserve our current family history hopefully for future genealogists who are just as into it as we are?
That's a good question.
That's
a really good question. Well, I always, family history starts with you, and so I, keep a journal, keep a diary. Now we have things like Facebook and Twitter, and we have all the social media, but writing a letter to your grandparent can create a great record. But write down what I started keeping my own personal history really, really young, because I wanted to make sure I remembered things that happened in my life, and I haven't always kept it as current as I should have. But you don't throw away those photos. Label the photographs that you take so you know where you were and who's in the photograph. Those are all things you can do right away.
Yes, and we talked with the class about creating your own photo album, either digitally or in print, and labeling them. And all of those digital photos that we have, add the metadata, put the names of the people. And we did discuss, when you find old photographs from family, you might recognize the handwriting, or your parents or grandparents might recognize the handwriting, but knowing who labeled a picture is important. So if you are tagging your pictures and putting metadata in your digital photos, write down who was the labeler as well, who wrote the caption. Therefore, you know who the informant, as we say in genealogy, was, right? That informant is important. So.
Great, thanks. So our next question comes from Cindy. My ancestor fought in the Revolutionary War for Connecticut. He went to Albany in about 1780 to collect his earnings and land bounty. Where would she go to look up the lot that he chose? He was in Onondaga County in 1800 in New York.
So Sue, we have the answer here.
There's something called the balloting book. We have a copy here in the office. They were not able to choose their own lot. There was a lottery for the lots. So if they actually, depending on their rank, were entitled to more than one lot, they could have one lot way over here and one lot way over here. So, and many of them didn't actually settle on their land, but sold it because they wanted to stay back in Connecticut or somewhere else. But there are some resources, and look for the balloting book. And you can find information like that in chapter 7 of the big book, the New York Family History Research Guide and Gazetteer has a chapter on military records and covers the American Revolution. So.
And has the balloting book been digitized? Would it be available in a library?
Yeah, it's on Internet Archive. It's
just
look for the balloting book, and you'll find an online version at archive.org and other locations.
That's a really good point. Do you want to talk about digital books for a minute for people?
I mean, so many of these county histories and other books that we use have been digitized, and so I use Internet Archive or archive.org and just use it like a catalog and type in the title of a book I'm looking for, the county or the balloting book, and you'll see they've digitized sources from resources like the Allen County Public Library, which has a huge genealogy collection, and other libraries. So it's a good resource to use.
Just sending a link to everybody there right now.
The magic of doing something live, right?
The Internet Archive, archive.org, is also where those New York State index.
I mean, they digitize microfilm and sound recordings and videos, all sorts of things.
Oh yeah, it's an unbelievable website. You could get lost in there for days. So before we continue on with the questions, Josh and Sue, would you like to give us some updates on our New York State Family History Conference and maybe some publications that we have coming out in 2018?
Yes. So, I mean, we're happy to make more plans for our New York State Family History Conference. I know Sue has been hard at work, and the whole team took a visit to Tarrytown, where we're actually going to hold the conference. We're grateful that Family Search and Find My Past have both signed up to be sponsors of the conference this year, and we expect to tell you about a few more in the coming weeks and months. But Sue, what do you have in store for the conference this year that's different?
Well, so the conference dates are September 13th through 15th, 2018. Registration hasn't opened yet, but we will be sending information about the hotel and reservations and how to register for the conference in September. We have a couple of new things coming up. One of the things, we have very good exhibitors at the conference. Besides going to lots of lectures, we have exhibitors who are there to show you their products and societies to tell you about their information. And what we will do is, for every paid registrant at the conference, they will get a $10 mystic bucks. Mystic notes, sorry. It's $10 that you will be able to get the mystic note validated when you make a purchase, and you will get $10 in cash back. So you'll have some money to spend at the exhibit hall.
That's right.
And we're also planning for people brand new to genealogy, a sort of getting started day that will be different from many conferences. So that'll have a different schedule and all.
So all just over a year away.
Yeah, just over a year away. So Tarrytown, September 2018. And, you know, of course, wonderful speakers for genealogy. Topics will be what we call methodology, how to do your genealogy. We'll have genetic genealogy, DNA topics. We'll have lots of New York record topics and online resources and things like that. So lots to learn. So
great, thanks. So we have one more question, and then so after this final question, we're going to continue answering every one of the campers' questions that we have. So everybody is certainly welcome to stay with us. But so for our final sort of usually submitted question comes from Cheryl, and she is trying to research her Swedish roots and finding it very difficult. Because for those that don't know, the father's first name is often the children's last name, which can be very, very confusing research-wise. So do you have any tips on how to work with those kind of last names?
Well, this is patronymics, and I do a lot of Danish research, and so Sweden is not that far away. They follow some similar patterns, but the patronymic system actually can ease you in your research process, because you know that if you have Soren Jensen, you know that the father of Soren Jensen is going to be Jen somebody. There's just an awful lot of people called Jens or Anders or Zoran. The key thing is so many of the Swedish church records are online or census records. And so you can go online at places like Ancestry and Family Search, take some time to browse through the records and look for information that the parish priest has used to identify which Christian Anderson is your Christian Anderson. So in my family, they all have a date, sort of they're born, and they have a date that they're confirmed, and that confirmation date carries through them in the records. In fact, at the end of the records, the priest will create his own index, and he'll mark where every person's, their baptism is, their confirmation, their marriage, and their death. And so details like that helps to track people that have very, very similar names. But it is, about making sure you understand the surname will change every generation because of the patronymical system. So don't be surprised at that. And you have to research along with the way that they actually kept their culture and their naming practices.
My heritage have a lot of Swedish.
My heritage has Swedish as well. Yes,
yes,
absolutely,
yes.
absolutely.
Okay,
yep. So my heritage and
Yep.
Family Search and Ancestry.
Yep.
Yeah, all sorts of resources.
Great, thanks. So our next question comes from camper number 9, and these are great. So what is your favorite thing about your job?
I loved Monday. I loved going to the class in middle schools. I have to tell you, that was really a lot of fun joining you in your classroom and talking genealogy.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the same thing. I love meeting other genealogists. It's the one thing that, I consider myself to have the luckiest job on the planet, right? I get to come and work with genealogists every day, people who share my passion for tracing into the past. And it's a lot of fun. So it's a favorite part of my job, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Great. And then also from camper number 9, how long did it take each of you to piece together your own family history?
I'm not done.
I'm not done either.
So I mean, years. It is. I mean, I've worked on it now for more than 20 years in my own family, and it just you build sort of. Once you find one person, you always have something else to find. So it can be a lifelong pursuit.
Yes, and yeah, I've been working on it on and off for 25, 30 years. Longer if I count the times where I said, Dad, draw me that family tree again. And he would just take a piece of paper and he would, impart his knowledge. And I still have some of his little trees that he drew. And, we do run up against people that we can't quite figure out, or we think we have figured out, but we haven't quite gotten there. And that's one of the challenging and what I really now find fun parts of genealogy, where you don't find a record that's going to say so-and-so was the daughter of so-and-so. So you have to piece together all sorts of different things and actually write up what's called a genealogical proof.
Yep.
Is that?
Yep. Yeah.
That's the fun stuff.
That's the fun stuff.
I'm still working on it.
So our next question comes from camper 11. How do you become a genealogist?
Start writing everything down.
Hard work, and
Yes.
you attend seminars and classes. There's accreditation programs that you can take. There's a couple of sort of college short course-like materials. There's institutes, but a lot of it is, there's webinars online. It's a lot of it's self-taught, and then taking advantage of some of the educational opportunities provided by the genealogical community. Things like the New York State Family History Conference, for example.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of us are genealogists. There are also professional genealogists who do this for a living, but there are millions of genealogists out there recording their own families and their friends' families and stuff like that. So yes, we all do a bit of that, when we take photographs and label them and look for newspaper clippings about our family and keep a scrapbook, and things like that. So. And
I started volunteering at a local genealogical society. So if you have some spare time and want to come into the G&B and learn how to be a genealogist, we're always looking for volunteers to help out with different projects.
Yes. It's a lifelong study.
It is.
Great. So next, camper 12 asks, do you have clients that hire you to find out about their own family's past?
Yeah, we actually have right now a genealogist in residence here at the New York G&B, and she's working on some special projects and some research that people are looking for. So yes, people do come looking for professional services from us and from others.
Great. And also from camper 12, have you ever discovered secrets that weren't known by your relatives in doing your own research? And if so, were they, how juicy were they?
I was waiting for a question.
Sue? Yeah, you know, I haven't found too many juicy stories in my family, but, you know, sometimes there were some tragic deaths. One of the interesting ones that I did find through doing the genealogy was a Civil War ancestor who never came home from the war, disappeared. And I was able to find an account of the battle that he was lost in, and the description from one of his fellow soldiers of how the Confederates overran their position, and he disappeared on that day and was never seen again. So you find some interesting stories. That was not particularly juicy, scandalous, but how about you?
I mean, I have a few secrets. You know, you always find things you weren't expecting. So I have an ancestor who murdered his mother allegedly and was put on trial. There was a big scandal in 1673. But I also have, you know, I have families that sort of had, you know, there was a first marriage in the family that I didn't know about. So there was this whole different branch of the family I had never connected with. And those things happen. It's what makes genealogy interesting. But you want to be sensitive to your family as you uncover those things. It's, you know, it can be very, very personal.
And those can come out through the traditional genealogy or through a DNA testing. So, you know, you do need to be aware when you go into DNA testing that secrets can come out.
You know, the DNA does not lie.
Right.
And I actually have one in my family. My my great grandmother referred to my great uncle as the shame of the family, and refused to talk about why. And so my mother, you know, who was into genealogy herself, dug up a newspaper article, and it turned out he was running a doctor's office out of his basement in on Bathgate Avenue in the Bronx. And he was not a doctor, at least a licensed one. So, you know, that was a pretty funny newspaper article. And so we got, that was the secret, you know, that we discovered. So it's interesting.
Then there are things still to be discovered. You know, maybe I'll find out whatever happened to my grandmother's brother who ran off to Chicago and was never seen again. So. Maybe a cousin will turn up.
Always something to find.
Great. So our next one comes from Camper 14. And this is a general question. What's the best way to find out about your deceased ancestors' lives? And I think here meaning sort of, you know, more than just where they were born or, you know, where they were married, but how, you know, how did they live? What was their life like? How do we discover that?
Well, I mean, I always take a look, and if I have a census record, I have an occupation usually, and so I can figure out whether they were a farmer, and then I'll go to a local history that's been written about that area, and I'll read about what life in farming was like, because it's rare to be able to find a diary or a letter that specifically says that, you know, your ancestor did this.
Right.
But you can certainly learn about the experience of farmers in the area where your family were farming and build out the story from there.
Right. So that's historical context, basically. So yes, reading about the local history, you know, you can do that through documentaries and things like that, as well as letters and journals and newspapers. Go back and read the local newspapers for the time and place where your ancestors lived and see what the community was concerned with.
Yeah, I mean, pull up the newspaper on what would have been their 10th birthday and their 15th birthday, just get an idea of what life would have been like at that period.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. So we're now at our last question from Camper 17. So what do you do if you can't find you know, anything about your parents or relatives, whether, you know, the grandparents don't remember much or your relatives don't remember much and there aren't any photos? You know, what can you do if you really hit a big brick wall like that?
Well, I mean, DNA is certainly, you've already taken the DNA test, is a great starting point for that, and looking for some of those other connections, those distant relatives. You might have to branch out pretty far to find a distant relative that has some information. And that's one thing that you can do. And I would just encourage you to think back to the sort of known to the unknown, right? You know, that things like the census record or an immigration record or a birth record, your family doesn't necessarily have to be the person that retains that information. That's kept at a federal or at a state repository somewhere.
Right.
So really think about records that will be created at a national level that you can go search.
Right, and those immigration records can be really important. Again, that was the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service, and you can request files, and you may have to, I'm not sure what the rules are off the top of my head, who can request them, but you can find that out. Do you remember too that that sort of question where you don't know much about your parents or grandparents, you're not alone in that. Think of what adoptees go through, and there are a lot of groups that discuss things like this on Facebook and other social media. Tips and techniques for trying to find people in your family that you don't have that immediate connection to. And all those little tidbits are going to matter. So keep track of those little tidbits. One thing we didn't talk about so much on Monday was where the information comes from and keeping track of that.
Yep.
I learned that the hard way. Early in my genealogy, I did not necessarily write down a good source citation, and the source citation says where you got that piece of information. But starting to record that from the very beginning is really important. And it can be conversation with my grandmother. But having that information that you can go back to is very important. So, but DNA and looking at the cousin connections, and hopefully you find more and more cousin connections through DNA.
And also, I mean, even learning pieces of the history. If you don't know where in New York or where in Ohio, you can do a search across all of Ohio and start to narrow down from there and look for naming patterns, right? If if the family's name is Joseph Patrick, how is that connected somehow back to the family tree? All of those are things that you can use to help identify your family.
And if you're jumping overseas, trying to understand, cultural naming patterns, because they can be different all over the world. Yep. So that's that local historical context that you may need to do some research in that before you actually find any records, for instance, about your family.
Yep.
So, and some cultures have oral tradition, and it may be that those oral traditions are what you need to pull out your smartphone and record the conversation with your parent or your grandparent or cousin or someone else, and keep track of that.
Yep.
So.
Great, thanks. So that's it for all of our questions. We've gone a little longer than we normally do, but it was a lot of fun today. Thanks to everybody for tuning in and for submitting the questions. And of course, thank you to Josh and Sue for joining us, sharing your expertise. So we'll be doing another one of these, I believe in December, but it'll be on our events calendar. It's already on there. You can sign up now if you'd like. And then we'll be posting some video clips on our YouTube channel, as well as Facebook, and we'll be doing a blog that has links to pretty much everything we've discussed here. So, if you want to go back and visit some of these resources, it should be easy to do that. So yeah, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, everybody.